The morning sun had barely risen above the pale skyline when the whirl of Rowan hail shifted in a way he could never have predicted. He had woken up early, as always, stepping quietly across the cold wooden floor of his tiny apartment, careful not to disturb his 8-year-old son, Jace, who slept curled atop a faded cartoon blanket. The kettle hissed weakly, the lights flickered, as though resisting his attempts to begin another day, and Rowan stood there, breathing through the heavy reminder that everything in his life required effort, sometimes more than he had. But nothing, not even the daily battle of scraping through bills or working double shifts, could have prepared him for the moment. An elegantly dressed figure would later whisper the most unexpected question he had ever heard. "Can I slip under your blanket?" It was bizarre, shocking, and yet the moment itself would become the turning point that cracked open everything Rowan thought he knew about life, kindness, and connection. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Spark. It truly helps stories like these reach more hearts. The day had started like any other, or at least Rowan had tried to make it feel that way. As he packed an old-school lunchbox for Jace, he avoided looking at the nearly empty fridge, avoided thinking about the overdue notice slipped under the door, and avoided the hollow ache that lived constantly behind his ribs. He had once been a rising star at an architectural firm, but when his wife passed unexpectedly, grief drowned his stability, and the career he had spent years building slipped from his fingers. Since then, life had been a long climb, a painful, rugged uphill journey made heavier by the fear of failing the little boy who depended entirely on him. He walked Jace to school beneath a soft blue sky, a few white clouds drifting lazily, as if they had no idea how heavy some hearts on the ground could be. Jace skipped beside him, humming the little tune he always hummed where he was excited. Today was a class activity day, and Rowan wished he had been able to afford the new craft materials the teacher had suggested, but the boy never complained. Jace smiled up at his father with eyes full of trust that made Rowan's chest tighten, both with love and with the quiet terror that one wrong turn could shatter everything. After dropping him off, Rowan rushed to the luxury corporate tower where he worked part-time as a maintenance helper. He had taken the job because it paid slightly more than his previous one, even though the environment felt like stepping into another universe. The marble floors gleamed with such intensity he could see his own reflection. Worn clothes, tired face, eyes older than his 35 years. Executives in polished suits passed by him without a glance, their expensive shoes tapping out rhythms that echoed superiority. But today the building felt unusually charged. Around mid-morning, whispers buzzed between employees that Aurora Sterling, the elusive CEO of Sterling Tech, was arriving unexpectedly. Rowan had heard of her, though only in fragments. She was young for a CEO, barely over 30, brilliant, strikingly composed, and known for making decisions that shook industries. Yet she was also rumored to be cold, unapproachable, and terrifying to those who worked under her. Rowan didn't expect their paths to cross. People like her lived in sky-high worlds. People like him lived in the cracks below them. But fate often pays no mind to such divides. Later that day, while checking the heating system on one of the executive floors, Rowan heard a soft but frantic tapping sound. For a moment, he thought it might be part of the machinery malfunctioning. But then another sound followed, a choked breath, sharp and uneven. He followed it down the hall, past sleek glass doors, until he found one slightly ajar. Inside, sitting on the floor in the corner of a pristine office, was Aurora Sterling. She looked nothing like the confident titan he'd seen in photos. She was pale, shaking, gripping her elbows, like she was trying to hold herself together. Her breaths came in short bursts, shallow and frightening. Rowan froze, unsure if he was intruding, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Panic. Real, raw panic. In that instant, she didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone drowning. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes drifting around her like fragile snow. Rowan hesitated only a heartbeat before stepping inside. He had seen panic attacks before his sister used to struggle with them, and he knew they could feel life-threatening even if they weren't. He knelt down at a respectful distance, his voice low and steady as he told her to breathe slowly, to count in, count out, to focus on something grounding. She didn't look at him at first, but gradually her trembling eased, her breaths lengthened, and her eyes found his. They were startlingly bright, ice and silver caught in sunlight. She blinked, as if coming back to reality, confusion flickering across her face at the presence of a maintenance worker next to her. Rowan stood to leave, embarrassed, certain he had overstepped. But then she whispered, so softly the air almost carried the words away, asking him to wait. She thanked him, her voice thin but sincere, and he nodded awkwardly before exiting the room, heart pounding with unexpected empathy for someone whose world seemed so far from his own. He thought that would be the end of it. But life, once again, had other intentions. 2 nights later, a thunderstorm rolled across the city. Rowan hadn't been scheduled for a night shift, but a sudden heating breakdown in the tower had forced the maintenance team to call him in. He tried to hide his exhaustion as he worked through the dim, echoing floor, the storm outside flashing against the glass like restless spirits. When he finished repairing the system on the top floor, the building felt eerily empty. Then he noticed one office with its light still on. Aurora Sterling. She sat behind her desk, her posture rigid, shoulders trembling slightly as though she had battled tears and was trying desperately to hide the evidence. Papers were scattered across the floor, a laptop blinking with error messages. It was clear something had gone horribly wrong. Rowan tried to slip past quietly, not wanting to pry, but she called out to him, her voice small, fragile, nothing like the commanding tone people associated with her. She looked exhausted, her face streaked from what she'd clearly tried to wipe away. She apologized for bothering him, but admitted she couldn't focus, couldn't calm down, couldn't stop her mind from spiraling. Work had become suffocating, expectations unbearable, and the storm outside had amplified the storm inside. He hesitated before stepping in. But she didn't seem to want advice or company. Just a moment of safety, something soft in a world full of sharp edges. The power flickered as thunder boomed. The temperature dropped abruptly as the heating system rebooted. Aurora shivered visibly. Rowan removed the thin emergency blanket he carried in his bag. He always kept one for Jace in winter. He set it gently on the chair near her and told her she could use it while he checked the room's vents. But as the cold intensified, she stood, took a trembling step closer, and looked at him with vulnerability so disarming that he felt his breath catch. Then, in a quiet, trembling voice filled with exhaustion and some painfully human, she whispered, "Can I slip under your blanket?" Rowan froze, not because her words were intimate. They weren't, not truly. It was the rawness in them. The honesty, the unguarded plea of someone who had held the world on her shoulders too long and found herself finally unable to stand beneath the weight. She wasn't asking for romance or closeness. She was asking for warmth, for comfort. For one small moment of human gentleness in a life that offered her none. He handed her the blanket again, insisting she take it fully, and she sank into the sofa with visible relief. Rowan stayed by the vent, pretending to adjust things to give her space, but Aurora spoke softly about her childhood, her responsibilities, and how every next decision felt like drowning. He confessed his own struggles, the loss of his wife, the fear of failing his son, the constant exhaustion. Their worlds were different, but their wounds weren't. When the heating finally restored, she looked up at him with gratitude deeper than words. Over the next weeks, their paths continued crossing, sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by Aurora's quiet intention. She began trusting him, asking about his day, his son, his worries. Rowan found himself drawn to her fierce strength wrapped in hidden fragility, and she found in him a humility and warmth she had never known in her polished, ruthless corporate existence. One sunny afternoon, Rowan brought Jace to the tower briefly so he could pick up extra pay paperwork. Jace wandered into the lobby in awe of the massive indoor garden display, and Aurora, walking in from a meeting, spotted them. To Rowan's panic, Jace ran straight up to her, fascinated by the sparkly ID badge she wore.